Every time I look at the StreamerX 4K from Røde, I get this ambiguity. Røde has reached out and sent me this device to check it out and test it to its limits. I did not ask for it and they did not announce it to me. One day it just showed up in the post. And to be clear, that was months ago. And to be completely honest, to this day, I'm for the most part just as confused as to what to do with this device as I was when I first unboxed it. Which is why I'm going to start this video upside down or backwards if you like. And here's my conclusion. I think it's a wonderful little device. Wonderful in that it packs so much into such a little body. Having said that, I have for a long time struggled to find real value in it until the point where I've realized that I've expected it to be able to do things that it wasn't supposed to be doing in the first place. I simply implied my wishful thinking on top of its actual specs, and then I was disappointed that it can't deliver against it, which was of course totally unfair. We'll come back to the wishful thinking part, by the way, because it is an important aspect of the StreamerX 4K. But first, for you to avoid the same mistake, I need to nail down once for all what it is before we start discussing what it isn't. It is, in a sense, two devices in one. First, it's a full-fledged USB audio interface with many extra and unique features, and second, it is a 4K HDMI to USB-C capture card with a 4K 30fps output with exactly one extra feature, which is a 4K 60fps HDMI pass-through. And from the video side of things, it is just that, nothing more, nothing less. A 4K 30fps HDMI USB capture card with an HDMI pass-through that is capable of 4K 60fps. It does not record internally, and you cannot plug in an external drive to one of the USB ports to record your video feed, but it can output it via the USB 1 port to a computer in maximum 4K 30fps, but not in 4K 24fps, which is really important to note as Røde does not make it abundantly clear, and some of the early adopters have indeed accidentally published laggy videos captured with the StreamerX in 30fps, which they have put on their 24fps video editing timeline. Also, it is quite a bummer when you would want to use it with the Sony ZV-E10 or the Sony ZV-1, because as soon as you set them to 4K 30fps, you lose the Face Eye detection autofocus. It would work with 4K 24fps, but not in 4K 30fps. And even though that's just a camera-specific limitation, it does happen to be a pretty unpleasant one with the StreamerX, as the aforementioned cameras are pretty popular amongst content creators. And as I do happen to use these two cameras, the Sony ZV-E10 being my main camera, and the Sony ZV-1 my secondary angle, which is also feeding into the StreamerX 4K via HDMI. This is why I'm now forced to record in 1080p 30fps to retain the stellar Sony autofocus. And even though I'm not capturing the main camera with the StreamerX, I need to have it recording in 30fps as well, not to mess up the video frame rate at the end. So it's a little limiting in that respect. Again, it is a 4K 30fps capture card with an extra HDMI throughput, which is by the way capable of putting 4K 60fps through. I know there are quite some, let's put it this way, missed opportunities, which we'll come back to later, but first things first, here's the good news. When it comes to audio, it is way more advanced than your usual single XLR input audio interface. First of all, thanks to the dual USB-C ports, you can rock a dual computer audio setup right off the bat. Plug the thick, super fast USB cable that came shipped with the StreamerX into the USB 1 and into your main computer that will also need to receive the video feed from the StreamerX, and plug another USB-C cable coming from a second computer into the USB 2 port, and there you go, you are managing the audio of two computers from USB 1. And let's just don't let it slip our attention, because apart from the second-gen Rodecaster series and the Fluid Connect 6 audio interface, there is, to my knowledge, no other audio interface from a well-known brand anyway that can do that right out of the box. Second, while it is not apparent, it has not one, not two, but 4 different microphone input options, which you can all use at the same time, under one condition, which I will tell you in a sec. There is of course the already mentioned XLR combo input for all your pro audio gear, with 48 volts phantom power if needed, and 76 dB clean gain. It's Røde's own Revolution preamp technology, which you can also find in the second generation of the Rodecaster consoles. It is in fact so clean that an extra line in booster on an active dynamic microphone with a booster built in will introduce noise to it, which I recently experienced with the Shure SM7DB. The gain is controlled by the dial with a microphone icon. Oh great, nothing to complain about here. Second, there is a dedicated headset input where you can plug in, surprise, a headset, like the Røde NTH100M with this little mic extension. So this port is a mic input and a headphone output at the same time. It will actually share the headphone output with the 1/4-inch headphone port beside it in the back, and both outputs are controlled with the headphone dial on the top of the device. Since it follows the audio footsteps of the 2nd-gen Rodecaster consoles, it also has a wireless mic receiver built in for Røde's wireless mics, the Wireless Go 2, the Wireless Me and the Wireless Pro. You just need a transmitter, stick it on the talent, and you're good to go. The StreamerX will be the receiver, so you won't need that for it to work, just a transmitter. And that's the 3rd mic input. The 4th and unfortunately last mic input is an often overlooked one, that is until you start recording with a camera plugged into the StreamerX. So this 4th mic option is the audio input from your HDMI source, like if you would have a camera feed going into the StreamerX, the audio from that camera, which could be an on-camera microphone like a Røde Video Macro, can be captured in the StreamerX as well through its HDMI audio input. It's just one part of the equation that you can use all these inputs on the StreamerX. Where it gets really mind-blowing is when you start using it with the Unify software. Now Røde is a tiny bit confusing here because it has first and foremost the Røde Central app to set up all its devices, and you can indeed do a lot of things there. In fact, many features are more straightforward to understand when setting them up in Røde Central, like routing for instance. In other aspects, however, it is inferior to Unify, like for handling mic inputs. Now to be clear, this is not going to be either a Røde Central tutorial or a Unify review. I've discussed the Unify app in detail in another video, go watch it. After you've finished watching this video, of course. If you want a deep dive, and if you are into audio, trust me, it's worth a look. Nevertheless, now what I will focus is how Unify works with the StreamerX. Let's start with audio routing. You will find in Røde Central quick audio setups for streaming, presentation, video call, and gaming, and it shows you in a routing table which input will go into which output. Example, in a video call, you want your microphone to go into the stream mix as well as into your headphones to be able to monitor your own audio, but you don't want the USB 1 or USB 2 inputs to go back right into the streamed audio, as then whatever the other side of the video call says will not only be heard in your headphones, but would also be streamed right back to them, so back into the caller's ears, only with a slight delay, so they will hear an echo of their own voice. To avoid this, you do not send their own voice back to them, very simple to follow. Of course, you can customize it as well. By the way, if it was too quick of an explanation of why you would set up a video call this way, have a look at another tutorial on my channel, which is probably the most successful video I've ever published. It is explaining exactly that. And while you're there, consider subscribing on your way back to this video. Routing can also be done in Unify. Moreover, you can customize routing even more there, but in Unify, it is a manual setup, so you need to know what you are doing. You have the different outputs, most importantly the stream and the chat output, because these are the outputs that you can set for different software as an input, and of course your own headphone output. And in each you can decide which input channel will be heard and at what volume. So as you can see, you can do here every routing job in Unify as well, not in a beginner-friendly way like you would in Røde Central, but you get pretty advanced options in exchange. Another important thing that you can do in Røde Central for the StreamerX is setting up and customize your smart pads, which very much resembles the experience of setting them up for the Rodecaster series, with being able to upload a pre-recorded piece of audio, set up some voice effects, add mixer actions, and trigger MIDI commands. You can do all this in Unify as well, but in Røde Central it's a full experience, whereas in Unify you are strangely missing some features. As soon as you start Unify with the StreamerX plugged in, the software will recognize the hardware. Or not, in which case you need to unplug and replug it. But if it does, it will display the 4 smart pads that you have on the StreamerX instead of the 8 pads that you would normally see there. You can toggle here presentation mode, which can come in handy if you're using it for online presentations. And behind the little eye infocon, you can see what the buttons will do with your presentation and also select which application they should control. Works like a charm, by the way, so if you ever wanted to ditch your mouse and keyboard to control your presentation, there you go. You can start it, stop it, go to the next slide, to the previous slide, and have a white or black slide for Q&As. Neat. Now, you can, for the most part, set up smart pads in Unify too. There's only a single downside. You cannot set up the mixer actions ducking and fade out in Unify. For this, you need to go to Røde Central, and this is a bummer as you cannot have both Unify and Røde Central open at the same time. To get back to Røde Central, you will need to quit Unify first. So I'd suggest you start in Røde Central, set up your smart pads the way you like them, and then close it and get back to Unify, because that's where the mind-blowing part hides, starting with the mic inputs. Because as great as Røde Central is, it also limits you big time, especially when it comes to using microphone inputs. I've already mentioned that in Røde Central, you need to select which mic input you are using. It has to be either the XLR input, or the headset, or the wireless input. The only thing you can add to the stream mix is the HDMI sound input as a second microphone source, if the HDMI source happens to be a camera with a microphone. In Unify, however, you can set all 4 mic inputs at the same time. All mic inputs appear as a source. You will be able to hear and mix all 4 of them. And this is unseen before. So if you have a wide-angle camera or a 360 camera with an HDMI output, you can ultimately shoot a 4-person video podcast with this device, where the video is captured in the camera, on your computer, and the audio is recorded in Unify in a multi-track, so every mic input on its own distinct audio track. And all will be in sync, amazingly. We'll get back to that. It's quite fascinating. Of course, the audio will be quite different depending on what mics you are using, but the good news is that the StreamerX has digital signal processing, or DSP, on board, which is the other big extra feature of it. It is actually Røde's first audio interface with built-in DSP that works on any XLR mic that's plugged into it. And this is not a baby version of what you get on the Rodecaster series. It is close to one-on-one the same thing. You get everything apart from the master compeller. So you have a noise gate, a compressor, a big bottom, an Oriole exciter, high-pass filter, a 3-band parametric EQ, a de-esser, and even panning. But let me give you a quick demonstration of how these inputs sound. I have plugged in the Røde pod mic via XLR into the StreamerX and therefore into Unify. Then the Røde NTH100M into the headset port in the back of the StreamerX. I have connected the Røde Wireless Go 2 transmitter to the StreamerX directly. And finally, I have my camera feeding into the StreamerX 4K via the HDMI port. And to my camera, I have my Røde Video Micro connected. So this is what you are going to hear when you are hearing the HDMI input in Unify. I have already dragged them up to an input channel in Unify. So now you can see that all 4 of them are receiving a signal and you see the meters bumping up and down. I just set the Unify recording to multi-track so that I can choose which mic channel I activate for you in the video. So let's just circle through them also by muting the others. Since the StreamerX 4K is a capture card in the first place, I will be using QuickTime to record myself to demonstrate its capabilities in that regard. I have set Røde Unified Stream as the audio input and the StreamerX 4K as the video source in QuickTime. Let's start with the wireless mic. This is the Wireless Go 2 transmitter going directly into the StreamerX's built-in wireless receiver, and this is how it sounds. Please note that I've added some DSP to it, which I think it helps. Next, the headset. I'm using the Røde NTH100M, but you can use any headset that you like using the TRS port in the back of the StreamerX. It is also a headphone port which shares the output with the bigger 1/4-inch headphone port next to it. They also share the controller, which is the knob on top of the device with a headphone icon. Third, and this is the input that not many are counting with, is the audio from your HDMI source. So either your gaming console, and this is meant to be with the StreamerX, or the microphone on your camera. And this may be a shotgun mic, or since I'm only using a single transmitter from the Wireless Go 2, and I have another transmitter and the receiver free, I could mount the receiver on the camera and use the transmitter to boom mic someone or just to mic someone with the lav mic wirelessly. Finally, and this is where the stellar audio capabilities shine through, the XLR combo input that can receive line or instrument level signals as well. So if you're a guitarist and singer, you could perfectly route in your guitar signal as well as another type of microphone for you to sing into and stream the whole setup while also recording it in multitrack. By the way, the multitrack recording, which is not a small feature in itself, even though it's more a Unify feature than a feature of the StreamerX. So when recording in multitrack, it is by default pre-fader, which is really thoughtful. This means that the fader position of a channel does not affect the recording volume of that channel. In other words, even if you accidentally mute one of the audio sources, it is still going to be recorded at unity volume in the multitrack files, so you don't lose it. However, as far as I could tell, it does apply the DSP effects you've set to a source, even in the multitrack files, so you need to be careful with the DSP settings, as they will be baked into the recording. On the Rodecaster series, you do have a choice whether or not you want to bake in the effects in the multitrack files. There you can easily set up to be able to do a wet-dry comparison of the recording. Still, at least the multitrack recordings are pre-fader, which is great in itself. And by the way, a really nice touch is that if you are renaming the channels in Unify, which I suggest you to do, not only because it's cool and makes it easy to relate the channel to the actual microphone or person, but also because the multitrack files that you are going to export later, by the way, you can export the stereo mix at a desired perceived loudness as well, which is awesome. So the individual audio files will have their custom names in the file name, so you can easily identify which one was which. Would be nice to have it on the RCP2 as well, maybe in conjunction with Rode Central someday, maybe. The video feature, this will be a short segment, it does what it's supposed to do, or better, what it is advertised to do. As long as you're using the thick superfast USB cable that came with the device, you should have no problems. Just note that the frame rate should be 30 FPS. To me, the most amazing video feature, which I'm not even sure if it's a feature, but anyway, has really and positively surprised me, is that while I actually saw a lip sync delay between the video feed and my voice while I was recording myself on the control monitor, on the actual recorded video, it was in sync, no matter which mic I was switching to, which is, quite frankly, astonishing. If you go back to the part where I have demoed the different mic inputs that I did not sync for every mic separately, and it stayed in sync, even though I'm pretty sure that it took less time for the audio to arrive into the StreamerX over the XLR cable than over HDMI or wirelessly. Nevertheless, I didn't have to mess with that. The StreamerX somehow magically took care of it, and it has done it several times for me already, so it does not seem to be a one-off trick or a coincidence. It really seems to be doing that. So for what it is, a 4K 30 FPS capture card with a 4K 60 FPS throughput and a stellar audio interface with 4 different mic inputs, dual USB ports and DSP, it is actually great and does what it's supposed to do and what it is advertised to do very well. The reason why many, including myself, feel that it could be even better, that there are a lot of low-hanging fruits not harvested in this initial version, which would make it an absolutely tremendous choice. First, it should support 24 FPS, not only because that's the cinema standard, but because many content creators favor this. Just look at any Gerald Undone What Gear You Use videos, where he asks 20 plus famous and successful YouTubers, all but one of them use 24 FPS. Also, if you happen to use Riverside FM for podcast recording or streaming, which are now getting pretty much integrated with Spotify for podcasters, they are defaulting 24 FPS as well, even in their paid tiers. It is only their business tier when they allow changing the frame rate to 30 FPS. Okay, on the other hand, StreamYard records in 30 FPS, so it's a draw, I guess. Second, the original price for it was $400. Now it is down to $300, $310, which is much more reasonable, so it's actually off the table. For €300 or dollars, it is great value for money. Then, instead of a pass-through, it would have been even nicer to have a second HDMI input, as beside the gameplay, you probably want to have a picture of yourself streamed as well. Actually, let me rephrase that, because the HDMI pass-through is actually a great feature. What should work differently is rather the USB 2 port. The USB 2 port could allow for 2 things, which to me are the biggest, well, not failures, as it did not promise any of this in the first place, but as I said, missed opportunities. One, you should be able to input a USB webcam into the USB 2 port. This could have been a workaround for not being able to add the second camera feed into the stream going out from this device, and this is, by the way, exactly what the Mackie mainstream allows for. 2, you definitely should be able to use USB mics with the USB 2 port. I don't even understand why it was not considered at a microphone manufacturer having quite a few USB mics in the lineup, and who, by the way, have just allowed for this very same thing with their latest firmware update on the 2nd Gen Rodecaster series. Also, again, the Mackie mainstream supports this as well, and that with any USB mic. Third, the USB 2 port should have had the option to also output the same video signal as the USB 1 port. This would have allowed the StreamerX to be used as a centerpiece of any home office setup where you want two computers to have the same camera feed available, or it could be used for a multi-view, or you could plug in an external SSD and record your video right on the StreamerX. Now these are of course options with more or less no hardware changes. Of course, most likely the USB port should be changed to be able to accommodate all these suggestions. But if you are thinking about the next generation of the StreamerX series, I would, on top of the improvements of the USB port, add 3 HDMI inputs right away to cover the standard video podcast recording setup of a wide angle and 2 close-ups, or just to be able to use another angle in your stream. Connected to this, of course, you should be able to switch between the angles, do picture-in-picture, side-by-side setups, green screen keying, lower thirds, and also choose to record either the program feed or the individual channels. Beside the HDMI pass-through, there should be a multi-view output, which could be a USB-C as well. Does not necessarily have to be an HDMI output. A second extra combo input would be super handy as well, so that the device is not targeted at solo creators only, but could at least be a turnkey solution for recording an interview. And finally, what I always struggle to understand is why Bluetooth is left out of the connections, as right now you cannot mix in a dialing guest from your phone to your stream, as I was yelling for Bluetooth channel into Unify and Røde Connect for over a year now as well. As for my overall thoughts, even if we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and into wishful thinking, still the StreamerX 4K is a device well worth its by now decreased price, and if you don't expect from it what it has never promised to be able to do in the first place, it is actually a pretty likable package, with some real superpowers, especially on the audio side. Most notably that beside the 2nd gen Rodecaster series and the WLAN Connect 6, this is the only audio interface to be able to hook up 2 computers at the same time, and by now the StreamerX goes more or less the same as the WLAN Connect 6, only the StreamerX also has HDMI capabilities. Also, there are not too many audio interfaces with built-in latency-free DSP on board, in this price range anyway. I can actually count on one hand the Steinberg UR22C and UR44C, the Tascam 102i, the aforementioned WLAN Connect 6, and our protagonist, the StreamerX 4K. Only it is also an HDMI capture card, whatever shortcomings it may still have in that regard. And if I think about it like this, it is actually a hell of a deal. Even if I'm rather confident that the 2nd generation of the StreamerX series will address most of the low-hanging fruits and will be even more awesome, but I'm also sure that it will come at a much higher price tag. So if you are a solo creator and looking for an all-in-one device with the best value for money, this is probably it. I hope I could give you a useful overview. If so, don't forget to like this video. Should you have any further comments, do not hesitate to put them into the comments below. And do I need to remind you to subscribe to the channel? After a couple of years on YouTube, I can actually promise you that I won't litter your feed with too many videos, but when I do feel like making one, I try my best to make it count. With that, thanks for watching, and bye for now.